Hey guys, what's up? This is Kyle back with another NFL SQL tutorial. This is episode 2, and I'm very excited you join us today. In the last episode, we came up with this query to find the windiest games in NFL history using a few simple SQL commands. And in this video, we're going to start looking at some more interesting tools that SQL gives us to start getting some more information out of our data and doing some analysis. So I'm going to get started by making a new query. And I'm going to start again looking at some columns from the game table. So I want to look at the points, visitor, points, home, and I want to look at those from the game. So I'm going to start out here. I just want to query all of our points here. And I want to start looking at, how games work with the over-under. And the over-under is just a betting line of how many points will be scored in a game. So SQL lets us do something interesting here. All the over-under is the sum of this, or in order to see if they were over-under, we should add these up. In order to do that, we can actually make a new column here and type the two columns and just add them together. So now we're going to get this third column. That's the sum of two columns on our game table. So we're going to get this third column here, and this is going to be the sum here. So this 27 plus 7 goes 34, right? And when you're evaluating if an over-under hit, you just have to look and see if this number is greater or less than the betting line before the game. So it happens that we have the over-under on the game. So let's query this. And now this was the betting line before the game started, and you can see, okay, this game was over, this game was under, this game was over, under, over. And we can start to see, did this hit or not? And if you were so inclined, you could do points visitor plus points home, which will give us this. And then we could even subtract over under. Let's run this. And you can see anytime it's negative, it was under. Anytime it's positive, it's over. So you can see we don't care necessarily about the number, but we just care about the sign. So pretty quickly here, we have a pretty interesting report starting to come together about maybe how frequently over-unders hit, or how you could start doing things like what's the average miss, or what's the average miss, whatever. And we're going to start doing more of that, but it's going to take us a little bit longer to get there. So before we do that, let's go back here and just kind of take a step back and go back and looking at just our sum here. So now what if we wanted to see what the maybe average of all of these were? So maybe I want the average points of visitor team scores, the average points the home team scores, maybe the average total. So in order to do that, there's a function here in SQL, AVG, average, and we just wrap our column around it, and we have to do this to every one of them. And doing this, we will get the average. So in this column, we have the average points of the visitors. And this is looking at all 5,000 games, and it's looking at how many points the visitor scored. So on average, the visitor scored 20 points. And then on average, the home team scored 23 points. The average total is just the sum. So, we're able to see pretty interesting information here using the average commands. And this is adding up all games with no filter. And maybe we wanted to use some of the other information we learned from the last thing and look at how the averages were in 2019. So we can use our where season equals 2019. So by using the filter here, we can filter these averages to only include rows that were in 2019. Run this, you can see, that's pretty interesting. It's a little bit closer in 2019 than the last 19 years combined. looks like the home team advantage is sort of dwindled in 2019. Maybe we want to see what it looked like in 2018. Okay, it looks like there's some of that advantage still. So maybe it just happens that this year there was less of a difference. Maybe we want to see, instead of a season, let's see a team maybe. Let's look at the visitor. Let's look at, yeah, the visitor equals KC. Let's look at how they usually do on the road. So it looks like when Kansas was on the road, well, in the last 20 years, they scored an average of 22.5. But let's see maybe with this past season. So we can add this condition in and maybe look at the average points that Kansas City scored this season away. So 2019 is a big difference. So on average, Kansas City scored 29 points away, and their opponents scored 17. And the average total is 47.5. So maybe we want to see where the home team is Kansas City. So we run that. So it looks like Kansas City scored 30 points on average at home and 29. So they're pretty consistent. 29.6 as the visitors. And then if we switch this, look at Kansas City on home, they're 29.0, which is fairly consistent. And you can see their visitors scored 21 points when they were visiting Kansas City. And then when Kansas City was playing in the home points, so their defense actually held their opponents at home to 17, to less than what they allowed at their home field. So that's a pretty good defense, which is pretty interesting. And so for right now, we kind of have to keep switching out our teams here because we don't have a way to kind of aggregate across all of the teams, and that's something that's going to come in a later episode. So for now, let's just kind of focus on kind of what we have here. So let's get rid of this query and go back to every game. And there's some other things we can do here instead of averages. We can look at some things like the max. Sorry about that. Let's look at the max. So here we have the most points scored by any team away was 59. The most points ever scored in a game, again, since 2000, was 62. And the biggest total points was 106. And let's see, 62 plus 59 is 112 or 111. So that's not what this is, right? Am I going crazy? 121. So these two games, obviously the home team and the visitor team didn't score these in the same game, or else the max would have been 121. But there's a different game where the sum was different. So this makes sense, right? We're not getting the max of this and the max of this and adding it together. We're looking at where the sum of the points in the visitors is the max. If you were to want to see the sum of the two maxes, you would do something like this. And that would get us 121. But this is not super interesting or relevant to anything. So we don't want to be doing that. We want to be doing this. But I hope that illustrates what order we're doing it. We're adding these two rows up for your game and then maximizing that result. Similarly to max, you can do min. So let's look at the min of all of these. So it looks like, makes sense, min is 0 for the home and away team both, and then the min game in total was 3. So this makes sense. I mean, maybe there would have been a game that was 0 to 2, but yeah, all this seems to make sense rationally. So if you started to do stuff like this, like home and visitor, you're actually going to start to see some errors here because you can't use these functions and query columns immediately after, because these functions query across all of your data and then return you the value. It can't really make sense of this. So we'll learn in a different video how to find these more easily. But for now, we can just kind of go back and make another query. From game, so we're going to look at the home and visitor from game. And let's also query for points visitor plus points home. So we'll run this, and this is unsorted. It's Atlanta and San Francisco come up first. But let's use what we learned in a previous video, order by. What we can actually do is order by the sum of these two. So if we run this, right, it's going to order, but by default, it's going to order in ascending. So there's our min value. This 3 here was actually between Miami and Pittsburgh. We can see what season it is here. So 2007. And then if we change these back to max, we can see what our other values were. 106. So if we sort by descending, we should see 106 is the top, and there it is, between Cleveland and Cincinnati. So we can look at the points home and points visitors and see 58 and 48, neither of which were the maximum ever scored in a game, but yet the total is the max. So that helps illustrate this point again. So I hope this was a pretty interesting video. We were able to start looking at these, what they're called aggregate functions. They go across all your records and return information about them, generate columns that are not directly on the thing, but rather a combination of two other columns, and then also apply functions to those to start to see some pretty information. And then we also saw how we were able to filter these functions using what we learned from the previous video here. And you can see now where the different aggregates are coming in is still based off of this where clause. So we were able to start taking some of what we did in the previous video with our general filtering and order by, but start to introduce some of more powerful techniques like the aggregate functions here and the summation functions here to start to get a taste of what SQL can really do. And I hope we stick with it, because more and more videos, there's going to be more and more interesting ways to pull this data and organize it and display it, so we don't have to keep changing our different queries to see, okay, 2019, if I want to see 2018, I can go here, but rather we'll start to get some ways to visualize all of these across all seasons, across all teams. It's just going to take a little bit more knowledge of SQL, so I hope you stick with it and come back in the next video.